Welcome to Behind the Line, where we pull back the curtain on the challenges facing first responders and frontline workers. The work you do is unique, and so are the stresses that go with it. Join me as we tackle key issues to reduce risks for burnout, and as we work to support you in doing the job you love without sacrificing being the kind of person you want to be. Hey there, and welcome back to Behind the Line. I'm your host, Lindsay Foss. If you're new to Behind the Line, what you should know about me is that I'm a clinical counselor specializing in trauma therapy. And after over a decade working with first responders and frontline workers around issues like burnout, compassion fatigue, PTSD, and related OSIs, I've become a passionate wellness advocate and educator for those who sacrifice so much for our communities out on the front lines. Behind the Line is a place for us to talk about the real life behind the scenes challenges facing you on the front lines. I created this podcast with the hope of bringing easy access to skills for wellness, allowing you to find greater sustainability both on the job and off. We are continuing in a series that we are calling Normal People Problems, where we're tackling challenges that impact lots of people like nutrition, finances, home management, and parenting. But we're looking at the unique challenges faced by those on the front lines, along with unique tools to help you manage these areas a little easier. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by my very good friend and colleague, Karen Peters. Karen is a registered clinical counselor working in private practice at Thrive Life Counseling and Wellness, right down the hall from me in Fort Langley, BC. She works in child and family therapy, specializing in offering parenting supports. She's a mom and the creator of many parenting resources, including the Parenting in the Trenches podcast, the Living Room Learning monthly e-newsletter, and programs on co-regulation, families supporting a child with anxiety, and so much more. Well, welcome, Karen. It's so good to have you here. I think, again, I feel like it's been a really long time, though. We had you on once before, maybe?
Once before. And you hosted on my podcast.
Right?
I'm like, so it feels like, who was who?
Where did we
did both.
What and when? Yes,
We did both.
Totally. So, I mean, I feel like I know all about you, but our audience doesn't. So why don't we open up with that? Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and what led you into your work doing counseling work with parents?
I have a background in supporting kids and families therapeutically, but in a number of different kind of like angles. So for the longest time, I worked for Ministry for Children and Family Development. I did some like frontline stuff. So I was working directly with families for the first half of my career there. And then the second half, I was more in management and helping people kind of create systems of responsibility for improving services. So it was more accessing clients' opinions about how we were doing our work and then trying to construct meaningful change so that if we made changes in our system, it was going to serve clients well. And so that was kind of that picture, and then moved into private practice after that. And I'm doing that full time now. I've got 2 kids. So I have the actual parent lens too, not just working with parents, but I am one. And I have a bit of a kind of like the flavor of parenting. Both my kids have special needs of some kind. So kind of like extra need support. In very different ways, but that puts me in kind of a position of always trying to plan around that and advocate for services and do that kind of stuff. And so a lot of the parents that I do work with have that lived experience too. And so there's something that's quite, I bring some relatability to the table for that because that's part of my world too.
Yeah. I mean, I know you mentioned it really quickly that I had been on your podcast as well. And you have had a podcast called Parenting in the Trenches. And what I love about the language of that podcast is just this piece about like, we are in the trenches and we're kind of in it in isolation, but together. if we let ourselves be together in it.
Yeah.
And I know that you have a lot of other resources that you've constructed around the kind of parent perspective journey, because it's this never ending journey
Mhm.
once you're in it. And I think that's really fantastically unique work. Like, I think there's a lot of people who can find a child or family therapist, but to find someone who really anchors to the lens of the parent experience and supporting parents in the journey of what it looks like to help shape their children,
Mhm.
that's a really cool piece.
Yeah, and for me, that comes also from a lived experience perspective. That what drove me most batty in trying to find my own resources and support therapeutically was that
Mm-hmm.
the rubber didn't hit the road in the way that I
Yeah.
needed. And so when you are in literally in those parenting trenches and you have no
Yeah.
bandwidth for anything else, the last thing you feel like you have a lot of space for is very deep processing. What you need is the now
Mm.
and the how am I going to survive this piece, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I'm not big on offering things that I haven't experienced in a way that works. So,
Yeah.
if I feel like I believe in it because I've experienced it working, that
Yeah.
gives me a different kind of lens and passion for offering that to other parents, because I'm not
Excellent.
in the business of wasting people's resources. So it feels kind of like that's an important part of the work coming from that.
Yeah.
If I've been there, I know what it feels like to kind of skirt things, and it just helps to have somebody else get it, be non-judgmental about it. And so I wanted to offer that, not just receive it. So
Yeah. Fair
yeah.
enough. I'm curious. I mean, you know that our audience is first responders and frontline workers.
Mhm.
Have you done quite a lot of work with parents who are in that kind of demographic? And like, what's your link and connection to that group?
Yeah. So I would say, when I started private practice, that was not the bulk of the work that I did. So,
Yeah.
um, still the bulk was family and parenting stuff, but the demographic of those people who come to see me has actually shifted in terms of their career backgrounds. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing way more of it now. And I do think that that's the aftermath of COVID. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the climate we're in. That's the trajectory. That's kind of the shift that's happened naturally in our
Yeah.
world. Um, so a lot of people are recognizing the burnout, recognizing the need for mental health services that they've held on by fingernails already. And
Yeah.
then this was way too much, rightfully so. This would break
Mm-hmm.
anybody. So when you get to that place, I think the concentration reflects that. Who I see
Yeah.
kind of reflects what's happening in the world. And so I would say in the last 2.5 years, if I were to chart the numbers, it would definitely be kind of like the inverse graph. I saw
Mm.
maybe 10%, and now I'm seeing closer to 70% of the
Yeah.
parents that I'm working with have that component to it. And it's an added
Yeah.
struggle for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
so
unique.
let's talk about that, the added struggle. Like, what do you see as being uniquely challenging for first responders and frontline workers as it relates to parenting?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm glad we're going right to the unique, because I think we feel pretty invalidated if we have a very unique experience of parenting. And then we
Yeah,
talk the generics, because the first thing that I tend to do as a parent is you don't get me. You don't get
totally.
the nuances of that. So for me as an
Yes.
adoptive parent, if somebody doesn't have that lens to offer, I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, but it's not the same. Right.
Right? You
So
don't know.
to dive into the unique pieces, here's what, and I'm really just kind of echoing back. I don't do crisis work. So I am not what I would
Mhm.
consider kind of in the same category of people doing that frontline first responder piece.
Mhm.
So what I echo back is really the data that I get from the people that I work with, and how they
Yeah.
are echoing to me, here are the pieces nobody seems to get. This
Yeah.
is what makes this experience unique. And one of the top on the list that feels, actually, I think it's top on the list because nobody's come up with an effective solution for
Hmm.
this. It it feels like there's an incompatibility between shift work
Mhm.
and the way the rest of the world's rhythms work,
Yeah.
right? So that's obvious. But then when we dive into so what does that mean when you're trying to parent kids who are embedded in all sorts of other systems that we want to promote? So what does regular school activity look like? Or rather, so much of what helps kids manage anxiety, we hear is routine and rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
What are we supposed to offer our kids when
Yeah.
what we come with is a template of 4 on, 4 off, 12 hours at a time, more
Yeah.
because we commute. And then that does not jive with the weekly library dates and the concerts and the swimming
Yes.
lesson schedule.
Totally.
And it just doesn't work. And so this never ending debate feels really stressful for parents because it's at
Yeah.
odds with what they want to offer their kids and feel like they're really being present for. So there's this emotional desire to provide a thing for their kids that in the world and the rest of the system offer in a very 5 day on, 5 day off, whatever, 7 day
Totally.
cycle. And that
Yeah.
does not work when every eighth Wednesday it happens to fall on your off day, right?
Yes.
And so even for people with really strong villages, so grandparents in the picture, aunties and
Yeah.
uncles, neighbors who help care for the kids, what they're present, kind of like what they're aware of is that they are not at the concert. Like
Yeah.
I'm the mom and I'm not there, or I'm the dad and I
Totally.
can't show up every Saturday for soccer practice, or and that doesn't sit well. We
Mm-hmm.
we want both, and
Yeah.
shift work doesn't help us with that, right?
Totally.
And I think the other piece of that that I hear a lot of is not just the rhythm of the 4 off, 4 on, but the length of the days, particularly for
Mm.
younger kids who are more dependent on you. They
Yeah.
can go for full cycle 24-hour periods without seeing a parent.
Totally.
And so I liken it to being separated or divorced, right? Like
Mm.
you have a very clear on parent for 4 days and a very clear off parent for four,
Yes.
right? Which is not
Yeah.
the typical kid's experience. So
Yeah.
it feels different and challenging, and kids
Mm-hmm.
have to adjust every time. It's not as fluid. So
Yeah.
if dad's rhythms with me are different than mom's, or if I have two moms, what I don't
Yeah.
experience both humans the same way. And if one
Totally.
is leaving the system to go out for 4 days and the other one's, I have to make a massive adjustment in expectations, in the
Mm.
way we connect, in what's
Yeah.
offered, what their strengths are. Um, it's just, I think it's just a challenge.
Yeah.
You have to integrate that somehow and accept that that is kind of like part of it. And that's really tough. It's
Totally.
really hard. Yeah.
I mean, it makes me like one of the as a working parent whose partner is a full-time stay-at-home parent, one of the running jokes we've had in our family for a really long time is that I don't live at my house. I live here at the office.
Mhm.
So when I come home and I'm like trying to make a decision, like I want to reorganize the pantry, my husband will be like, I'm sorry, you don't live here.
That's
Like
my
you don't get
territory.
to have a vote about this. This is my thing.
Right.
Get out. This isn't your thing. Um, right? Like my involvement is different. My involvement is differently limited. And I'm a like regular 9 to not even 5, like 9 to 3,
Hmm.
9 to 4.
Yeah.
I'm home more than most parents. And
Yeah.
I'm still like, sorry, you don't live here.
Yeah.
Right.
The
And so
identified
how
working out
much
of home
more
parent.
totally, but
Yeah.
like not even for like yes there's from the child perspective that adjustment. I also think from the parent perspective
Hmm.
there's that adjustment of like I go out to this system where I am a given way and I'm looked at a given way, I'm respected a given way, I'm thought of a given way, and then I re-enter this system and I have to recalibrate to like
Yes.
the noise and the demands and the way of being in this role. And I think that's probably hard on both sides, right? Like kids readjusting to who you are showing back up, but also me readjusting to who I am showing back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That feels like, I mean, in a more glorified way, kind of like when you go on vacation, if you only give yourself a
Yes.
weekend away, you don't
Hmm.
actually have the time to fully immerse yourself in the thing that you have to adjust back out of. If
Yeah.
you were to go away for the full week, your adjustment back is actually harder, even though you've had more time to rest, because the
Yeah,
contrast is greater, right? And that's
totally.
who you are and the primary role you play and your
Yeah,
headspace, like what mental space you're in.
totally.
It's a big, yeah, absolutely big adjustment.
Mm,
And I would say on that piece actually is the other thing that gets highlighted is the communication
okay.
between parents. So for couples who are in the situation, communicating with each other needs a system
Yeah,
more so than most, because there needs to be embedded kind of mechanisms for, like, are you couples that check in while you're barely seeing each other for those four
right.
days or do you have such a set up rhythm that like you don't need that contact, but then what does it look like to transition back into a different 4 days?
Yeah,
um, and that you have to actually be expert communicators. Like that's almost like a job demand. If you are going to
totally.
have family life incorporated into this type of work, that is that much more important
Yeah,
than a lot of other couples have to kind of grapple with. Because if you're not constantly overlapping, you don't have the micro moments of kind of figuring out your dance. You have like two
hmm
dances and you just have to keep. That's like that's not an easy thing to communicate and pass batons back and forth and say, okay,
Yeah,
I can mentally shift now. You're here, you're doing this, right? I can let go of this, right? That's not my job to
right.
step in. This is tough. And for kids, they ask for things. So, like, you know how
Mm,
that is even developmentally. You take all of this out of
yeah,
the picture, but you're going to have like the, oh, daddy's girl phase, you know, where it's
yes.
like the kid goes to the one parent, whether they're there or not, is like
Hmm.
go to, right? That I think is just amplified when there's
Yeah.
a setup that insists that they're more dependent only on one parent for a period of time.
Hmm.
And then it can be really hard after, even if parents switch over really well and pass the baton, for the
Yeah.
kids to adjust to that and go, right, I am now oriented primarily to that person. Um,
Hmm.
it's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
I think one of the other unique challenges that I hear from first responders and frontline workers that I work with and just in life is this piece about how the like very clear awareness of how the world is not okay comes home, right? Like, I had that call today and the kid was the same age as my kid,
Yep.
or I had that call today and it gave me this glimpse into the future of what happens when my kids are teenagers, or,
Mhm.
right? Like, how many clients, and I mean, to some extent, how much do I feel this? Like, will I ever let my kids go for sleepovers because of
Mhm.
a different awareness of risks
Yep.
that we may have that our friends who are accountants may not have the same
Mhm.
way that we have? Like I know that we were very, very cautious about letting our kids drive in other people's cars for like a really long time, and still are probably more cautious than a lot of parents
Yep.
about letting someone else pick up our kid and take them 4 blocks home from school, because I don't know you and I don't
Yep.
know how you drive and I don't want my kid in your car.
Mhm.
Like it just feels differently like here for
Yep.
people. And for those listening and not watching the video, I'm holding my hand in front of my face.
Yeah.
Like it feels very differently close and present
Yes.
to us, and it makes some of the decision making harder. It makes us weirder. Like, I know I have weird days where I come home and my kids really don't want to be that close to me, but I'm like, I really just need snuggles
Yeah.
to make me okay
Yeah. Yeah.
today, because there was some material that got brought up in my day today that makes me feel like I need to kind of treasure you and hold you a bit closer.
Mm.
And they're like, Mom, you're being weird. Like,
Yeah.
I know,
Yep.
here's where we're at though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the limitations around not being able to like share that,
Mhm.
but also feeling it and carrying it into how we're making choices and how we're shaping decisions and how we're interacting in different moments is
Yeah.
really, really important.
Well, and there's two pieces. I think there's two components of that. There's more the immediate, like you've had something happen in your day
Yeah.
that is particularly like punch to the gut, or
Yeah.
and your jobs are ripe for this. So it's not that that necessarily happens infrequently, but they feel more acute, or like, I remember that day. Like that
Yes.
was a day and I remember
Yeah.
that incident because it hit just too close to home, right?
Yeah.
There's that, but there's also the slow burn of being
Mm-hmm.
in a job that changes your worldview, which is kind
Yeah.
of that piece that you're talking about. We make like more grandiose parenting decisions about like transportation in general with people we
Yeah.
haven't checked out their
Mm-hmm.
driving history. Right. So like that isn't because one day I had this experience. That's more like the
Right.
over and over again I see this dynamic. And so my
Yeah.
nervous system has adapted to recognize that as a tangible high risk. Like
Yeah.
it's a everyday risk. And
Mm-hmm.
I shape my vision of what I trust the world to offer my kid. And
Totally.
so, and uh, you don't get to erase that. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where the work comes in, where we recognize and own what's happening for us. And
Yeah.
really, like, the difference for kids is here's the thing, more globally, I think, for parents. We've been raised in our culture to be parents who feel like they have to hide the experiences they have. So I don't mean the content of, but the experience itself. So
Mm.
if I'm thrown today and then I have to
Yeah.
go climb back into the parenting mode, my first thought is protect my kids from feeling that I'm thrown, right? So
Yes.
then my goal when I transition into that space is to, I'm fine. Yep,
Right.
sure, we'll play Barbies.
Right.
Sure,
Fake
we'll
it.
fake it. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm increasingly aware of how much better it is for both parents and their kids' development to actually model what it looks like to own the experience or the feeling that's happening
Totally.
that feels like it's leaking. And owning it doesn't just mean naming it, it means I'm going to model what I do with it. That it's still
Yes.
mine to take care of. So I'm not burdening my kid by saying that I'm thrown. I'm saying, boy, I'm thrown today. And
Yeah.
I don't have to share details about it, but I can say, but this is how it's sitting in my body. And I'm going to go take an extra 5 minutes because I really want to
Mm-hmm.
play well with you. Or
Yeah.
I'm going to go, and when you have the kind of map in your mind that this does your kids good,
Yeah.
you don't feel guilty then about kind of sharing that piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not harming them by sharing, you're modeling every human is going to have a hard experience, a hard day, a hard moment, a hard relationship, a hard whatever.
Yeah.
And every person needs to find a way to say, I get how that shapes who I am today and how I come across. And I see you in this picture. Like, I know it affects you, and this is what I'm willing to do to make sure that I attend to that. And that gives our
Mm-hmm.
kids permission to say, yeah, that's hard for me. And I need a way to take care of those emotions, right? I need a
Totally.
avenue to let that spill. And I'm not going to be judged for it or told you're not behaving well, or we
Mm-hmm.
support each other through it, right?
Totally. Well,
Yeah.
that's the piece, right? Because I think more than any other thing, what we gift our kids with is language,
Mhm.
right? So when we are using that language, we're gifting them the ability to use that language themselves,
Yeah.
right? And so when we act like we're fine, what we're modeling is that when they feel a feeling, they should pretend they're fine too. That's
Yes.
probably not better. That's probably not actually what we want them to do
No.
with us or in life. Like we wouldn't wish that on them.
Yeah.
But if we wish differently for them, we have to do differently for them.
Yes.
We have to do differently ourselves to show them how to do. And
Yeah.
that comes to us to be able to give language to, I'm not having a great day. I mean, it can be very age appropriate, and like
Yes.
we don't have to be highly descriptive of why I'm not okay and the
No.
content of my day, like you mentioned, but
Mhm.
still owning that it's been a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and the language is one thing, but also I think about like how it's received. So
Yeah.
when somebody in the family system, in your family zone says,
Mm-hmm.
this is what's going on for me, and it's heavy or emotional or big or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
scary, how do the people around respond to us expressing that? So it's one thing
Yeah.
to have a language, but I could have a lot of words and not use them ever because if
Yeah.
it's not safe to say it, because I'm going to get in trouble for feeling a certain way. And so
Mm-hmm.
and you're right, like kids, 90% of their learning is through modeling. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
lecture that you told them or the live this way, but I'm going to do something different
Yeah.
about it. Like it's what they see and then
Mm-hmm.
what happens after you demonstrate that.
Yeah.
Did you turn out okay? Like
Mm-hmm.
when you did those things, did that help everybody feel better or did that make things worse?
Yeah.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so for us to say, I'm going to show it is way more potent for a kid's
Yeah.
learning. And it's also good for us. Like we gain
Yeah.
something from it. This is not just to serve our kids well. This is
Mm-hmm.
this is good healthy practice for us. I
Yeah.
was thinking the other day too about like the transition into one space to another and when those in particular hurt. I think there needs to be kind of a regular practice of transitioning, that you don't consider this type of work something that you can leap tracks from, that there
Yes.
needs to be um I don't know even what the word is, but like there needs to be something slower, more permeable or gradual about it.
Yeah.
And every person might find a different way that's effective for them, but I think a way is important, that we don't just assume, oh, I'm fine, the day wasn't that hard, so I'm just going to leap into the. I think it's an important ritual to
Yes.
do, whether it's your commute home and what you do with it, make it
Yeah.
quality. Don't just like zone out, but do something with it
Yeah.
that helps you either digest what happened at the workplace, um, or discharge some kind of emotional energy that you have or physical energy. Maybe you have a practice where you park further from the hospital you work at and you like sprint to the car after work every day just to get out the like I
Yeah.
gotta discharge that chemical stuff, right? And then
Yes.
those whatever works for you, that practice from the day to day helps you not accumulate the
Mm-hmm.
junk that you don't know how to
Yeah.
offload
Yeah.
and you don't want leaking into your family. Um,
Yeah.
and then for the extra hard hitting days, it's like, what do I do for that? Do I need time expansion? Do I need that ritual to take place longer? So I text my partner and just
Mm-hmm.
give a code word of like, need an extra 30. Or like,
Yeah.
what's your system of communicating to honor, like, I am doing this for everybody. I'm going to go take care of
Yeah.
myself so that
Yeah.
I come home better, more available, more connected, more present.
Right.
I've been able to switch the hats more
Yeah.
effectively, you know?
Well, and we actually had a conversation about that piece with Heather Toes
Mm,
um, a while back. It's been a while. I'll post the link to that one in the show notes with this as a bit of a reference for those who maybe missed that one. But we talked a lot about the ritual of coming home and that decompressing kind of time. And actually, one of the pieces of feedback that came from that is what about when you're single parenting
yep.
and you don't have that person that you can tag team and say, hey, I need you to take it for 30 more. And one of the things that we talked a little bit about was giving different permission to even things like, I don't maybe normally let my kids watch an extra half hour of TV, but on those days I
Mm,
might, so that I can know that they're somewhere safe and know
yep.
that it's probably better that they're doing that than
Mhm.
me coming home and pretending like I'm okay and interacting,
Yep.
because I actually need that half hour to be a better version of me that
Yep.
can be like capable of being present here. So while yes, like quantity wise, they're getting less quantity of time
Mhm.
with me as a caregiver, they are getting a better quality of me if I take that half hour and let them watch the stupid
Yes.
show than
Yep.
if I did the inverse of that. And that we have to give ourselves some grace and permission to choose to bring a better quality of us as opposed to a quantity.
Mhm. It is actually it's a different parenting philosophy. It's
Yeah.
philosophically a different headspace to be in.
Yeah.
Because what I don't, I think it's a kind of almost a low bar when we ask parents to like I know you feel guilty about that, but like, just take care of yourself. It still feels selfish.
Yeah.
I don't think it erases the guilt. I think the way we think about it means
Mhm.
guilt isn't necessary. We
Yes.
have to change how we think about it. We've
Yeah.
become a culture of very prescriptive parenting styles. There's the hot topic book that hits the shelf, and now everybody's parenting that way, which is why we come
Totally.
up with these cute labels of helicopter parents and whatever, right? Like, there's a,
It's fun to hear a family therapist mock the things. It's great. I like it.
it's brutal. It's so
It is brutal.
unfair. No
It's
kid
not
is,
human.
no, it's not. No kid is the same.
Ugh.
No parent is the same. No environment is the same. No
Yeah.
history is the same. It's not the same. No resources are the same. What a joke to think we can all step into a template. It doesn't
Totally.
work. And that's where all this effed up guilt comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then we are locking ourselves into an expectation, and we operate from the belief that we are now harming our kids if we don't do it a certain way.
Yeah.
When really, if we shift that, it gives us permission to see the good in what we are offering our kids. Like,
Yeah.
and quality versus quantity is one of those kind of pivotal. If we can wrap our heads around quality is better than quantity, that goes a long
Mm-hmm.
way.
Yeah.
And when we talk about rituals, I also think like parents have this expectation of when I do spend time with my kids, it has to be like quality would mean quantity. Like it won't be
Yeah.
quality unless it's 2 hours and something really special. And our
Mm.
kids remember the rhythms of normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
That feels reliable to them. That feels safe to them. That feels like there's room to drop your shoulders and connect. And so you don't need it to be long. You just need it to be consistent. So, what would
Yeah.
a ritual look like for connecting after you've done your ritual of self care?
Totally.
I can't wait to like you. That can be the delivery when you come in the room. I'm going to plug in my computer before it dies. Um, that can be the ritual that you bring into the room when you say, I'm so happy to see you. And it's almost scripty. It's fine if it's scripty.
Yeah.
Like they will learn to cherish. I love it when my mom comes home and says, I can't wait to see you. I'm going to go do my self care and I'll be back in 20 minutes. Set a timer. Right. And
Yeah.
then it's like this anticipation of it's not like you've robbed them of that 20 minutes. It's that, oh, I can't wait. And then you
Yeah.
know what's coming. It's this I can count on you and I can count on our ritual of connection. And I know
Mm-hmm.
that after, mom's changed her clothes and washed her face and had a meal,
Mm-hmm.
I get to have 40 minutes of undivided attention playing the game that I've been waiting all day to play with, right?
Totally.
And that happens at the end of every 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or the end of every day, or whatever the thing
Right.
is that's realistic for you. But that
Yeah.
puts way more currency in their bank account, their emotional bank account, than it does
Mm-hmm.
to kind of like randomly throw things around. And whether they're big
Totally.
or small or long or short, it's the rhythms that matter. But you got to make them your own when you do this kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And they have to
Yeah.
kind of like feel more intentional. You have to be intentional.
Behind the Line is sponsored by Beating the Breaking Point. Beating the Breaking Point is a 7-part online training program designed specifically for first responders and frontline workers and tailored to fill the gaps in your training to support resilience and sustainability. Whether you're new to the work and wanting to cultivate tools to prevent burnout, compassion fatigue, and related concerns, or you are deep into your years on the job and have gone a few rounds with burnout and other mental health challenges, this program offers the foundational pieces you need to support personal and professional wellness for the long haul. You are a helper. You love your work and you sacrifice a lot. Investing in you and your sustainability is the best gift you can give yourself and those who lean on you. We make this program as risk-free as possible by offering a limited money-back guarantee to ensure that it's a fit for you. If you enjoy Behind the Line, you are going to love this program. Google Beating the Breaking Point Lindsay and find everything you need to get started, or use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode. Well, that's the piece, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like, I think one of the pieces we talk about on the podcast a lot is this idea of the emotional bank account, not for kids, for us. And this idea that like it's all math, right? So like what I have to give and offer
Yeah.
generously of myself is based on what I invest in to that bank account.
Mm-hmm.
If I am in overdraft and debt from giving generously because I'm not doing anything to refill that, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And then the challenge to that is when we have demands placed on us, it feels resentful and we feel snippy and we're
Yep.
not our best selves. So, yeah,
Yep.
I'm giving generously, but I'm not actually,
Yep.
right? It's like someone being like, yeah, I guess I'll give you, right?
That's
Like
right. Yeah.
that doesn't
Withheld.
feel good to receive. And
No.
so, while yes, you're doing it on paper,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't count the same way in how it feels to receive for the other person. It doesn't count
Yeah.
the same way as how it feels to give,
Yeah.
right? We can give more authentically generously when we actually have something in the bank account.
Yeah.
If we don't have anything there, it's really hard to give and not feel like
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that's how we've talked about kind of trying to re-strategize this piece about mindset in how we talk about self-care to try to make it like it isn't selfish. It's actually the most selfless thing you can
Yes, it
do
is. Yeah.
because it is how you fill the bank account to do any of the things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So by earning it, by investing it, you have more to give and do, and to do it with a better quality of you.
And I also think we have these boxes where self-care means we're not around anybody. I mean, sometimes,
Right?
sometimes
That's
that,
true.
sometimes
Mhm.
that is my self-care. I actually need no
Sure.
stimulation, so you can't be in my
Yeah.
room with me.
But like
But
self-care is not only in
no,
isolation.
it's not always a solo activity. And again, going back to this opportunity, you can kill a couple birds with this stone because
Yeah.
you can model self-care by doing it with, you build in a rhythm of self-care. So there's actually somebody who, uh, I, s- I haven't seen her in a long time, but worked in several hospital settings and
Mhm.
had really high needs kids, lots of energy in the home, and would come home and say, "But I just need another hour, and I can't get that out." I'm like, "Okay, what would it look like? Let's fantasize about a version of this where you get your hour and you're
Mhm.
with them at the same time. What would that look
Yeah.
like? What would it look like to still feel rejuvenated but have them in the room?" And we just kind of named, what is it that helps rest come to you? Like, is it the lack of stimulation? Is it the environment that you're in? Is it your own internal, like, are you spinning internally? Do you need to write? Do you need to
Mhm.
sit down and get that out of your head? What
Yeah.
would help you? And the practices were all things that you could do beside your kids, and they could do it with you. And
Totally.
so they created cozy corners in one room. They had one room where they set up a beanbag in every corner of the house, three kids and for
Yeah.
her. And they all went to their spaces, so nobody was touching. And it was quiet. And they set up a clock that had the whatever timer on it. And they had their little kit. And their kit had a journal in
Mm.
it, some Play Doh to squeeze, whatever. And they all just did that. Mom's home. We go to our corners. We do our thing.
Totally.
We see each other. We're in the same space. We have soft music playing. And then we roll into a meal. And then, like,
Mhm.
normal life continues, you know?
Yes.
Like,
Totally.
I think we get tripped up in, like, I need time away. And
Yeah.
it's fine, but it's not realistic to only
Mhm.
have your self-care operate in that zone.
Totally. Well, and I think some of the self-care pieces can be things that we just don't even necessarily name that way, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
some of it is like family movie night. Like
Yes.
I needed the decompressed time, I
Yep.
needed the cuddles, and I needed the popcorn, frankly,
Yep.
right? Like, and we all can share in that. And I don't have to navigate anyone arguing for a beat, and I don't have
Yes.
to, right? I don't have to like actively parent in this moment, but we all get to feel like we're participating and sharing space in something.
Yep.
And that can feel refreshing for everyone involved, right? I know one of my favorite self-caring activities to do with my 5-year-old, almost 6, is yoga. And she actually has
Mhm.
been doing this thing where she wants to do yoga gymnastics because she got a balance beam for Christmas. And so she lays out the balance beam and we lay out the yoga mats and we do like 10 minutes of an actual yoga video, most of which she doesn't actually do,
Yeah,
but finds
doesn't
it
matter.
hilarious.
Yeah,
And I giggle so hard.
which is great.
I
Yes.
get my little stretch out of it. And then afterwards, she teaches me how to do it for real because obviously none of that
She's
was
got the better
legitimate.
way. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so we just like goof off together for another like 3 minutes
Yeah.
and then we're done.
Yeah.
Right. So like less than 15 minutes. And she feels awesome about
Yeah.
it. She talks about it for the rest of the week. Mom
Yeah.
and I, when we did yoga
Uh-huh.
gymnastics, mom and I, when we, right, like mom doesn't know how to balance like this. And then she holds this contorted thing that I'm like, nope, and I never will. Like, and it's right. Like,
Yeah.
there are these moments that are like, it's not hard, it's not complicated. There's nothing, I was going to do yoga anyways. It's
Right.
great.
Right.
Right. There was nothing that was depleted from that.
Getting creative about this stuff
Yeah.
erases some of those rigid boundaries we've created around these concepts of what I need and what I can get and what's realistic and what's not.
Yeah.
And sometimes that has to happen in synergy with another person. We get locked into our ways or what was taught to us or how our families ran when we were kids or what we see the neighbors doing, or we've limited perspectives. Having conversations with other people about how do you manage this? Like,
Totally. Well, and even like the
yeah.
constructs around self-care, like I think culturally we've been really done a disservice about
Yes.
that, where it's like candlelight and bathtubs
Uh-huh.
and
Or paid
like
for. It
it's
has
these
to be a
things that
service.
are very isolated.
Yeah.
Whereas like when I think about what actually like refreshes and recharges me, having like a hysterical laugh is
Mm-hmm.
one of those things. I cannot get that in isolation. I
Right.
have yet to find a comedian who is really that good
Yeah.
that they bring that out of me when I'm sitting in a room by myself.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, do you know when it happens? It happens when my family attempts Pictionary. Hysterical,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely hysterical. Right. And so there's these moments that I'm like, that's actually the better self-caring. Like, if I wanted to choose an investment that's going to pay higher dividends,
Yeah.
me watching a comedian versus me playing Pictionary with my family,
Yeah.
this one's going to
Yeah.
pay me higher dividends on my investment every time, and it's paying everyone else too.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I think what we think of is if I'm caring for myself, I'm in the absence of caring for someone else. So that's why we
Right.
call it self-ish. It's not.
Yes.
It is not, because that's not what it is. And it doesn't have to
Yeah,
be set up that way, that it comes always at a cost
totally.
to
That
somebody
it
else.
pits us against each other somehow.
Yes, it does. And that's where resentment
Yeah,
grows. That's why it's like, ugh, because you need this from me, right? I mean,
totally.
yeah. As counselors are not normal parents. So, like, we've talked about that before, right? So, I've had
Totally.
a conversation with one of my kids who's could bounce off walls all day, and I can't handle that a level of energy being around it all the time.
Mm,
And I've had very deliberate conversations where I've said things that nobody else would probably say to their children. But I would say things like, right now, I'm feeling like I'm obligated to be with you. Like,
yes.
right now, she's not offended because we've made this about me, not about her. I'm
Mhm,
like, you are doing everything fine for you. And that
mhm,
works. And also, here is my experience beside you, and here are my needs. And it's great that we know that we have different needs.
mhm.
And these are the ways in which we can be next to each other or interacting in a way that serves us both. And we
Yes.
involve our kids. The older they get, the more creative they get to be in problem solving around that. Do you have any
Yeah.
suggestions about what would meet those criteria? Like,
Mhm.
because some people are like, I dread coming home and all my kid wants to do is play whatever. But for me, it
Mhm.
was like anything to do with role play and
Any
dolls. I was like, oh,
imagination
gross.
game.
Yeah. So if that's not your gig, don't offer that. Like,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean that you're not offering something, but collaborate with your kid and go, yeah, that's not totally like my top of my list. You make a list, I'll make a list. Let's see where we have something in common.
Yeah.
And if those are the harder days where you just don't have that extra, sure, I can role play and enter that zone with you for 20 minutes. I just don't have it, but I don't want to give up on it all. That's
Mm.
when you consult the overlapping list,
Yeah.
right? Here's something we have in common that feeds us both. Let's go
Mhm.
spend some good time doing that. I don't get resentful about spending my time doing that.
Totally.
Right. And
Totally.
so, and it teaches, again, we're modeling for our kids, like, how do we, that's teamwork essentially. How am I going to
Mm-hmm.
work with my classmates on figuring out what our priorities for a group project are? How am I going to communicate that effectively? How am I going to own my own
Mm-hmm.
experience of that? How am I going to, it doesn't have to feel personal.
Yeah.
And me investing in that, I think, gives her the sense she matters to me, that I'm willing to
Mm-hmm.
go through that exercise with her. It doesn't,
Yeah.
right? It's not blamey. It's just like
Totally.
acknowledging what's real for us both and how
Yeah.
do we be there for each other?
Well, that's the piece, right? We were actually having a conversation that was really similar this last week. My 6-year-old has been struggling with letting me leave at bedtime again,
Mm.
which we go through phases around.
Yep.
And it's hard because when we're not in a phase where that's a problem, evening is a time where I experience more freedom. So after a really long time of having long days and then needs of kids at night and, being up through the night, to get to a phase where I got to say, okay, good night, everybody, and turn off lights and then go get a workout in and make school lunches and maybe watch half an hour of a show and shower and go to bed felt like this really lovely reclaiming of my sanity.
Yeah.
And so when she struggles more with sleep and needs me there longer, it either delays or nullifies some of those
Yeah.
pieces. And then I experience frustration because I'm
Sure.
losing
Feels
some of these
costly.
things that feel important to me that keep me
Yeah.
sane. And so, if it's a day or two because we had a nightmare, it's one thing. When it's going on, it's a different thing. And so we had this conversation where it had been going on. And I said to her, I love so much that you want me here with you. That feels very special that, mommy is this safe person that makes you want to have me close by. That's cool. But at the same time,
Mhm.
this is right, like part of how mommy can be like nice mommy is by
Mhm.
having these things that happen during this time of the day.
Yeah.
So how are we going to balance this where you have this need you have met,
Yeah.
but also mommy gets these needs met because it's how mommy continues to do the things tomorrow for you
Yeah.
that you really like,
Yeah.
right? And that we don't end up with a version of mommy that yells that she's really frustrated and mad all the time because I'm spent and it's right, like it's not
Yeah.
okay anymore. And so we did a brainstorming session. She's like, I don't really know. I was like, do you have suggestions about that? I don't really know. I said, well, here are some of the ideas I have. And I threw out some different ideas. What if we tried this? What if we tried this? What if we tried that? And I said, it doesn't have to be any of those, but probably we need to come up with something because I feel like if we continue like this,
Yeah.
it's going to be a lot more yelling. And that's not really the kind of mommy I want to be. And I don't think that's the kind of experience you really want to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And like super age appropriate, very
Yep.
much like lots of discussion and modeling. But she's like 5 going on 6, right? Like we're not having to wait until they're like 12 to have solid kinds of conversations
Nope.
with our kids about these kinds of pieces and how we're doing and how they're doing and how those intersect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It removes the shame and blame out of it. Nobody's needs are less than, but they're
totally.
also having to navigate how do we coordinate our needs, right?
Yes.
And that's a fair, that's it's not just okay to have it. It's a gift to give that type of conversation to your kid.
Mm-hmm.
Clarifies it, it puts it on the table. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
come from a place of I'm pissed at you for having this need. I am like
Yeah.
I'm just acknowledging that you have it and it feels a little incompatible with
Yeah.
what
And
I
we need
need
to
right
figure it
now.
out.
So how do
Totally.
we figure this out? Yeah.
Well, and it's like this modeling about every other relationship because the reality is aside from a parent, no other relationship
No,
is going to bend over
caters
backwards this
100%.
much for you,
Exactly.
right? So how can we create a safe space to have some of that like training ground with our
Yes.
kids so
Yeah,
that they are more equipped to handle relationships that aren't willing to cater to them quite so much?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. There was one piece that we started out talking about that we kind of left,
Okay.
and I want to diverge back real quick before we wrap up. And it's the piece about time.
Okay.
So when we opened talking about some of the different challenges that are unique to first responders and frontline workers, you identified this piece about shift work and time being differently challenging for them compared to typical parent populations. And I'm curious in terms of some of those, like we've been talking about some of the like ways of managing other parts of parenting. in terms of ways of managing that kind of shift work often on in the role, out of the role, kid adjustments and parent adjustments to that weird pattern and dynamic it creates. Are there thoughts you have about what helps people to be more effective in that?
So I do think the rituals that we talked about do help with that.
Yeah.
Because if we know something we can count on is coming, we're less urgent about clawing for that connection in the
Yes.
transition time. I can hold it longer when I can count on what's coming. If I
Yeah.
don't for sure know that thing is coming, I feel insecure about trying to find a way to reconnect, right?
Totally.
And so, because the chunks of time tend to be big, whether it's in a span of a day because they're 12 hours long plus, or if it's because it's 4 days in a chunk of having a certain way of being and then not, um, our I think when we stop, I don't know. I think if we stop expecting it to feel differently, we give ourselves and our kids more permission to have feelings about it.
Hmm.
Like, it's okay that our kids have a harder time.
Yeah.
What they will need to do is, in that space of transitioning, have the opportunity to feel that all out in order to practice a way of being it, because it isn't temporary. It's not like you
Mhm.
have this job for 8 months, you have
Yeah.
this job for a long time.
Yeah.
And so your kid's unique adaptation is going to come with the lived experience of going through all the motions they need to go through to regulate.
Hmm.
And so do you.
Yeah.
So being able to say, it makes sense that I believe you
Mhm.
when I get why. When we
Yeah.
say those things, we're just reflecting and not trying to control our kids' experience, and we're not trying to control or mask our own. We can just say, oh, yeah, that was an extra hard one. Okay, I see what's happening
Mhm.
here. And you know what? It makes a ton of sense because you haven't seen me in 3 days. Like, I get that.
Totally.
Like, that's fair.
Yeah.
When we say that, it gives space for our kids to actually like trust them to
Hmm.
do a process. They are wired to actually, for the most part, do it. We just have this expectation that we get to rush them through it,
Yeah.
or that we get to fix it or prevent it, or and so while we can build in these rituals and these rhythms differently that fit our
Mhm.
unique schedules, um, we can't do that expecting that it solves an emotional transition because
Mhm.
we are humans that live off a bit of a different clock. And especially if our
Yeah.
kids are exposed to that other clock elsewhere, school rhythms
Mhm.
do not follow your rhythms.
Yeah.
They are kind of split all the time in
Yeah.
trying to navigate both things. So, and again, that requires us to be extra understanding and patient, which means,
Mhm.
again, that transition for you home in preparation for being able to validate, remind yourself, right, what's the two most important things I can offer my kid when I come home
Yeah.
is I'm coming for you in 20
Mhm.
minutes. And yeah, you look like you're having a hard time, and that absolutely makes sense. And it's going to be okay. Right.
Yeah.
And those reassuring you are not broken for feeling this. And I
Mhm.
am not broken for needing a transition and some
Yeah.
self care and whatever else becomes the repeated experience that kids get to go, right, this isn't so scary. This isn't so
Mhm.
hard. This isn't so overwhelming. I can
Yeah.
adapt, and so can you.
Totally.
Um, we're not fighting it or resisting it all the time. So there's like,
Mhm.
again, the mental acceptance. And then what does that mean for how we approach it
Totally.
differently?
That's a good one. There's a piece I've been mulling. Um, when I was a kid, my parents are not first responders, but my dad worked away from home quite a lot. And so he'd be away Sunday to Thursday, and then he'd come home on the weekends. And there was a lot that was really challenging about that.
Hmm.
For sure, it was kind of like being single parented half
Yep.
of the time, um, and yet not all at the same time. But one of the things he did that I thought was really interesting was he did this piece with me that we talked about as a bit of a touchstone. So
Mm.
we both shared a love for writing. He always wanted to be a novelist and never did. And I always thought that I would do something, that I wanted to be an author or something like that when I was a kid. And so I was probably like 9 plus during this phase of life. And he and I did this thing where we got matching journals at the local stationery
Love it.
store.
Yeah.
And we would each have them for our weeks apart, and we would write whatever we were working on. He would do his thing with it. I would do mine. And then he'd come home, and before he left on Sunday night, we would swap. And so I would get to read his thing, he would get to read my thing, and we would write in the margins and make notes. And I love this, or that feels confusing, I don't understand what's happening there, or whatever. And then he'd come home again Sunday night, we'd swap back and we'd get our feedback, and then we'd continue on with what we were working on.
Yeah.
And it was this really cool way of like having common interest and sharing something, even though we weren't together. Yep. And again, like, I'm old enough that this is like pre-video messaging and like long distance phone calls were really expensive. So we didn't actually talk to him a lot during the week. And so this was a way to stay connected during these chunks of times. Yeah. And so there's this piece about like, how do we create, if we're having these gaps, how do we create some of those touchstones that carry with both for us and for our kids, that in between time? So whether that's like a quick emoji text that just says heart you, that we get to send back and forth, or if it's something a bit more like in real life than that, which I think is actually like a bit more meaningful these days, right? Like, can we do the like classic, we leave a note in their lunch kit, or like under their pillow, or like something that just feels like this routine way of saying, hey, I thought of you, hey, you matter, and vice versa, feel our sense of mattering to the family system as well.
That's such a good point. Developmentally, we enter that stage actually quite young, where, it's that object permanence. Baby crawls around the corner, they panic because they think, well, I can't see you, therefore you don't exist anymore, even though you're still 2 feet away from me. But that goes away really early. So we could already start at toddler. I remember first day of kindergarten, there's a ritual in my kids' school where the kindergarten teacher hands out the kissing hand. It's a book. It looks really old school, but it's classic, and my kids have kept it because it meant so much in how effective it was for them to transition into a space where they had to be away from their primary caregiver for the first time for a big chunk of time. So you could do this in daycares, you could do this. But the idea was just that mom raccoon and baby raccoon were going to be separated for a good reason. And that the way for us to carry that it wasn't going to be as scary as we had in our head was really, I'm going to put a kiss, an invisible kiss in your hand, in the palm of your hand. And at any point during the day where you wish you could see me or hold me or touch me, you just touch your own hand, touch the kiss on your hand. And there is something that our kids are very capable of doing in small ways. That's yours. Kissing hand was your journal. It was matching. Like how you mentioned that, because it matters. It's not that they were so separate. There was something in common, and there's something like, imagine the endless possibilities of how you can manifest that. Know your kid. If they're artists, send a little sketch back and forth. If they're like, it's entering their world and staying there even when you're physically not present. And your kids feel that. It is not less than. In fact, it might feel more special because they're hungry for something and you're meeting that need. So
well, and interestingly, I think they do it back, right? Like, how many times have my kids sent pictures? I have one sitting right here, I'm looking at it, with me to work and asked me to hang it in my office. It's because they think I forget about them.
Yes.
Right. And so they want me to carry this thing with them. My daughter often sends me with jewelry that belongs to her. So I wear really awful jewelry to the office very regularly, that is like fluorescent pink, because that's it. And it's her way of being like, Mom, I want you to wear this today because it's special and it'll make you think of me. Yeah. Great. You betcha. You got it. I've had stuffies sent with me to work because they're worried that I feel lonely. And I do this thing where I will bring the stuffy and then I'll set the stuffy up in funny positions in my office, and coming with me to get my lunch, we'll take a selfie together and I'll send them and be like, hey, I'm going to see you in an hour, but heads up, this is the adventures we got into today. Right. And so like, I think that it's not just us for them. I think they also want to do it for us, and we can invite that space to just be like silly and fun together
Yeah.
without being like, oh God, no, I'm not wearing that bracelet.
Right. Yeah.
Right? I might not sometimes wear it all
Put
day.
it in the pocket if you really need to, but
Right?
like
But
you
it goes
somewhere.
back on in the car.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
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 Okay. So before we wrap up today, Karen, I want to have a bit of an opportunity just for people to know where and how they can connect with some of the work that you're doing with parents. So I've mentioned your podcast and we'll for sure link to that. I also know that you've got a lot of free resources and other pieces that you've got in place, and we will link to a lot of those. Are there any of those pieces that you'd like to speak to?
It's all kind of organized into one kind of hub. So living room learning is kind of the overarching umbrella. If you go to that space, you're going to find both resources to pay for that are more like involved and an investment in terms of like a course you might want to take. I've tried really hard to make every resource very family friendly. So for the courses in particular, they're meant to meet you exactly where you're at. So either at a parent level, but also at a family level. So if people are wanting to like have a bit of a guide to like increasing communication with their kids around feelings, being able to kind of access and lower anxiety felt in the family, the resources are there and they are designed to be able to do with your kids. So there's a variety of options there. Nothing in particular that I would say like needs to be thrown out there, but more the way in which they've been created are supposed to be really easily digestible and practical and met to it's where the rubber hits the road. That's the guiding post behind some of those materials. So if that's the type of thing that speaks to you or fits your life right now, then you might find something there that's helpful right now.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time
and
and joining me today. That was
Great
really
conversation.
fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks again to Karen for taking time to join me today. Don't forget to check the links in the show notes if you want to learn more about Karen's work. And also a big thanks to you, amazing listeners, for continuing to spend this time with me here. If you value this podcast and want to help us in our mission to support frontline wellness, there are 3 ways that we can encourage you to do just that. Number 1, rate and review Behind the Line on Apple Podcast or wherever that you're listening. Number 2, follow me on social media at Lindsay A. Foss and engage with me in this amazing little community that we're building in that little corner of the internet universe. Every time that you like, comment, and share our posts, you help us spread like wildfire thanks to the magic of the algorithm. And number 3, share this resource and our other resources with those you know, whether that's forwarding our weekly newsletters on to your friends and coworkers, listening to the podcast as part of a team meeting, or sending out our Burnout Indicators Checklist and Triage Guide as a staff-wide tool. Every little bit helps us to take our mission to the next level and serve those who are sacrificing so much to serve our communities out on the front lines. Know that we can be found online on our website, on most major podcast platforms, as well as on YouTube. We make all of our resources available to you because the work you do matters. But more than that, you matter. And we want to make sure that you have what you need to keep up the good work at work, as well as in your real life outside of the work. So use it and share it. And until next time, stay safe.